first question, how do you see the experimentation team structure sort of overlap and work with a growth team structure, and how those two uh, functions and at least on paper they have different names, right? Experimentation team and growth team, but how do you see it in practice working out? Yeah.
Yeah, the way I've always messaged it internally, and I even have sort of like a visual to represent it, is that the growth team in my mind is divided into the different parts of the user journey. So acquisition, conversion, onboarding, activation, and so on and so forth. And then the experimentation, I always talk about it as a kind of a layer that cuts across all of them. So going back to what we were talking about before, Ben, to me, experimentation is should be built into each and one of those areas through somebody who leads the experimentation program and sort of like enables the other areas of the growth team to adopt that experimentation mindset, so that they are not just so that the majority of their initiatives, whether it's like in acquisition or conversion, should be an experiment technically. Right, so
Right.
that's how we are setting it up at MongoDB, and frankly, that's my vision. So yeah,
So the second question, maybe it's a bit of a sub question because it's very much related to a little bit of that structure, the way that you started kind of talking about like the building blocks there, is about that process model itself. And what you're referring to is from the experimentation team perspective is a bit of a centralized structure, or can you speak a little bit to the size of the teams that you've worked with in the past and the size of the quote unquote problems that you worked with in the past, and how centralized versus how hub and spoke it sort of needs to be, and any kind of learnings around that? Yeah.
yeah. So I've worked with different setups in the past, Ben, and I realized that the most efficient one and the most effective one when it comes to experimentation is what we call the center of excellence type of setup, where the experimentation team becomes a center of excellence for experimentation, and their job is not to own any parts of the user experience, but it's actually to enable others to run experiments in their own areas. Whether that is in the beginning, sort of like being more involved into actually running the experiment itself, to later down the line, sort of like helping others run their own experiments and become sort of like the person or team that oversees sort of like the integrity of the experiment, making sure that the overarching roadmap
Hmm.
that we need to get to that velocity we talked about is makes sense, and all the things are properly set up in the different swim lanes. So that to me is the model that's been working most efficiently in my
Yeah.
experience.
So in my experience, I think it's very much like team size and culture dependent a little bit. And so my third question here is a little bit around that culture, because when you're thinking about having an experimentation team come in and like tap into what the product team is doing and the strategies they're looking to test, or what the marketing team and the website digital side is looking to test, or even like the acquisition team, like something like that. A lot of times experimentation will start in one little area and then expand out. What do you
Yeah.
see as like, some cultural wins to get that expansion? Um,
I want to say, Ben, that after having worked with experimentation programs in general for many years, there's definitely um, there's definitely an area which is probably more on the marketing digital conversion side that is by nature going to be faster than the product side. And here's why: particularly in the SaaS world, the product itself, like changing the products, requires longer processes
yep.
and hardcore more hardcore changes to just the process, and because you're touching the product itself, right? So to me, the best approach is to start in an area where there's there's a lot of untapped opportunity, typically like websites, web, digital efforts, and the infrastructure is nimble enough for you to, to get things going quickly and get the results quickly, because that is going to prove that the model works. That you can have business impact, and then with that, then the organization is going to be confident enough that, okay, now the mentality is built, the processes are live. Now we can slowly move into the other areas that are harder to change. And as you know, from working with us, there are different approaches, right? So experimentation isn't necessarily only like the quantitative A/B test that you launch in a part of the experience, can be like achieved in a different way. But at the end of the day, it's like you got to build that confidence from the organization that, this is the way forward. This is the way we operate.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. We see a lot of fun with the communication tools that we use in terms of getting people on board and to translate that confidence, right? So if we're constantly sending out, almost the not quite gamified, but these communication tools is like, hey, look, we had this question, we did this test, that we got this result. Eventually, it gets people to raise their hand and be like, hey, I want to be a part of this fun. Like this.
Yeah, we actually have a more informal way of doing it, but at every our weekly growth weekly meeting, if there's an experiment coming up on deck to be launched, we actually take bets. It's like,
Yep.
what do you think is going to happen, and then we record it, and then it's way more informal, but like people are just like they have fun. So
Yeah.
yes to the
Yeah.
gamification.
And creating the structure to where you can quickly take just 5 minutes, like, hey, here's the next one coming up. A, B, what's your
Yep,
bet? Bam, out.
correct.
And people have fun with it. So
Slack, polling on Slack. We did
yeah,
that as well. So it's like it's fun. That's fun.